Adam, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm very well. I'm so glad we finally got this, managed to hook up after many weeks of cancellations and moving things back and forth. How was the jury duty? Did you get called upon?
So, yeah, I didn't actually get onto a jury panel. I just got as far as the orientation,
Okay.
and I didn't get to serve, but it was an interesting day nonetheless.
I've never done it. The other thing I've got to say, thank you for hooking me up with the ticket to come and see you and Liz Wright. It was one of those gigs. Now, before you'd said that you were doing the show in London with her, I'd never heard of her. So I'd spent about the week running up to the show just trying to digest as many albums as I could. And going through a catalogue, I couldn't get through that many. So I didn't know that many tunes when I got there. But I don't know if it's just because the sound in that room in the Barbican is so good that it's like listening to the record. I don't know how mic'd up some of the instruments were. It sounded like the piano wasn't mic'd up at all, and just the room was just doing the work. But it was a really visceral musical experience, and I just left, and she's been on like constantly, like I'm driving my kids places and it's on. They're like, "Are we listening to this again?" So I got to thank you for the ticket, and also just thank you for kind of introducing me to her music, because it's just wonderful. So I'm going to ask, what's it like playing with her?
Wow, it is. It gives me so much joy and so much energy and so much freedom. You know, I'm kind of at a point where I don't do a lot of touring, and the kind of touring that Liz does is not for it's not easy. We're moving almost every day, either by airplane or sprinter van or train or whatever. A lot of late nights, a lot of early mornings, and I get tired. It's
Yeah.
not carrying all the gear and all that stuff. But as soon as we get to sound check and even before we get to sound check and Liz opens her mouth, I mean, just being around her, she just gives so much energy, and she's such an engaged person. So there's that. But then as soon as we get to sound check and I hear one note, I'm just like, oh yeah, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. I forget that I'm tired. I forget that I'm jet lagged or whatever. So it's really renewing, and it's different every night. The set list doesn't change that much from night to night, but what she does with each song really changes from room to room, city to city. I'm always genuinely surprised. If you see me on stage with a big smile watching her sing, that's not show business. Like I'm as tuned into what she's doing as anybody could be on stage or off.
Yeah. It was, it's very difficult to kind of explain the vibe that was going on, but it felt like, how long has the band that was on stage that I saw that night, how long have you all been playing together?
It's a bit of a mix. The keyboard player has been with her almost since the beginning of her career. He's been with her 20 years, 25 years, I don't even know, a long time. And then everybody else is a little newer. I've been with Liz 5 or 6 years. The bass player joined around that time. The drummer actually was pretty new, but he has a lot of history playing with the keyboard player. So there's a lot of connectivity.
Yeah, it seemed like there was like, that was the perfect word, connectivity. It seemed like there was a lot of connectivity between you all. And the other thing I was going to say is I think it was the first guitar solo you took. I don't know if you do this when you listen to music. Do you start playing lines in your head like, what would I play over the top of this?
Yeah, I do sometimes.
Like you start to hum a little tune or think, if I was to take a solo, and then I was doing that, and then your solo came up, but everything you played was like the polar opposite to what I was thinking. Like your phrasing was so out there. I was like, what the? I was like, has he fallen over? But no, he's got it together. And then everything was kind of tying up. And it was textured and layered and different, and it stood out, but without being, hey, look at me. Is that kind of your approach when you take solos, or was it just something random that you decided to do on the spot?
No, I would say that's my modus operandi. because that's the kind of stuff that I've always been drawn to.
Yeah.
I mean, I do appreciate tidy guitar solos as well. I
Yeah.
really do. But I also deeply love Jeff Beck, who kind of had that effect on me when anytime I listened to him. I mean, in later years, the thing that he did was so beautifully, I think, was just to play like a singer, doing the, Somewhere Over the Rainbow or Lilac Wine or, things where the guitar just becomes super vocal. But for a lot of years of listening to him, especially, early on with Jeff Beck Group, like on the Truth album, and then later with some of the more kind of jazz rock fusion stuff, so unpredictable, and yet also totally accessible.
Yeah.
At the same, something about it just, it's not. I mean, the way you put it is right. It's not at all what you would expect, but it also doesn't, at least for me with Jeff Beck, doesn't make me want to change the channel.
Yeah. It's like it keeps you interested in listening. Your ears just perks up. I remember a great lesson that I took from, do you know Marty Friedman, who was the Megadeth guitar player? It was one of the first things I learned from him. He said, if you're in the key of A minor, and he said, most people will sit here, A minor pentatonic. Very few people are going to play an A flat over that. But if you hit an A flat, the first thing it does is people go, what the hell was that? And if you bend from A flat up to A, it's like, what the hell? Oh, it's okay. We're back home now.
Yes.
He's like, it just catches people's ears and then you can take them on a journey because then you've got them. I just thought that was such a wonderful way of starting a solo or starting some improvisation. And I guess that kind of falls into the same category.
Yes. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So life in New York. How long have you been in New York?
On and off for nearly 30 years now.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I love New York. My wife is from Long Island, so we've done many trips over to the States. And there's something about Manhattan. It's just a really cool vibe about it. It's similar to London, but things are still open at 3 a.m. You can still get pizza at 3 a.m.
I remember when we didn't get to talk after the Liz Wright show at the bar.
Yeah.
Because you had to catch the last train.
Last train. It was like 10 to 11. I was like, this is a joke.
Wow, how do people? I mean, yeah, I was there actually last year, and I was staying in London, and I went out to the O2 to see John Mayer. He was playing a solo show at the O2. And after the show, it felt like kind of a scramble to get back to London before everything shut down. I mean, I guess I'm spoiled. I just assumed that any city of comparable size to New York, things are open
24 hours. Or close to it. But it's not. Right. Last trains out of central London are around between 11 and 11:30, depending on what train and where you're going. But so if you're at a show, if you're at the O2 or you're at Wembley, you're constantly, when it gets to kind of 10:30, quarter, you're clock watching. I saw Guns N' Roses. They did a secret show at the Shepherd's Bush Empire, and they, as is Guns N' Roses, they were an hour and a half late coming on stage, and we didn't get out of the venue till 1. It's like, well, what are we going to do now? Thankfully, we managed to kind of blag a lift home with somebody who was kind of going that direction. But yeah, it's a bit of a joke, but.
Yeah, in New York, that would not be a problem. I mean, I don't do it as much now just because most of the folks I play with don't want to be out super late. But, I used to play shows. There was a club in New York. It shuttered a few months ago, but it was called the Rockwood Music Hall.
Yeah.
And it wasn't uncommon to play a show there that started at 11 or at midnight. I had a residency at another club for a few years that was called Banjo Jim's.
Yeah.
And we used to start at 11 and play until 1 or 2. In New York, I mean, that's part of the fun of New York is a little bit getting to be a vampire.
Yeah, I mean, there are clubs in London that stay open that late. You just can't get a train home. Yeah, something that sort of needs to change. So how's New York changed, like the music scene? How's it changed from 30 years ago? So what was that, the 90s?
Yeah.
up to how's it changed?
One of the main things that has changed is that things are more spread out. When I first moved here in 96, I was really interested in kind of skronky jazz music. And the main place you would go to hear that was a place called the Knitting Factory. And I was also interested in more straight ahead jazz, classic, living, legendary artists and up and comers as well. So for that, you would go to the Village Vanguard or the Blue Note. And if the weather was nice, the walk from Village Vanguard to Blue Note, if you wanted to see two things in one night, that's an easy 10-minute walk. To walk down to where the Knitting Factory wasn't terribly far. And then if you were into kind of singer-songwriter stuff or rock stuff, on the Lower East Side, there was half a dozen. In other words, rather than opening up the newspaper to see, oh, who's playing tonight, you could
Yeah.
almost just go out and have a drink and then go to one club. And if it
Wasn't happening.
yeah, you'd go down to see something else, or maybe you had an early gig and then you could go catch somebody else's gig later. All of New York seemed, for the live music scene, there were just so many little clubs in a reasonable walking distance, and a lot of places were no cover, or not Village Vanguard was not no cover, but a lot of rock clubs or singer-songwriter clubs. It was really easy to hop around and see, and then you'd run into people on the street. You'd be eating a slice of pizza at 11 o'clock, going from one place to another. And in the last, I can't say when it started, but a big thing that's different now from back then is now if you want to hear the really up and coming stuff, you go to, I don't know, the Owl, which is a club in one neighborhood in Brooklyn. And near there's a really great, more straight ahead club called Bar Bayou. But after that, there's just like not anything else. So things are just more spread out. And what that does is it means you really have to plan ahead more.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm going to hear this one thing. And it does make it a little less likely that you're going to run into people, because there's not really a neighborhood where you would run into people. So that's to me the biggest change. And also people are in their phones more. 30 years ago, maybe a few people had, flip phones or, early things, but I think it was, you just wouldn't see people who've paid money to go into a place and then they wouldn't be paying attention.
Yeah.
So that's a little more challenging. Other than that, it's kind of the same. There's still a lot of crossover between jazz and, like what I do. I play jazz. I am a singer-songwriter. I also play guitar with other singer-songwriters and other jazz players. And there's just a lot of crossover between different scenes.
Yeah. So it's still going on. New York's still got it going on.
100%.
Yeah, cool. Because I was there, I think the last time I was there, my wife said, look, take a day out, go into the city, go and take it to yourself. So I went to one of the guitar stores and I was asking one of the guys there, I said, like, what's it like? What's life like as a musician here? And he said, well, you know what? 10 years ago, you'd do a wedding gig Saturday afternoon, you'd come back into the city, then you got a jazz gig down at wherever the club was. You do that maybe Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, an afternoon gig, and he said a lot of it is starting to dry up. It's like there's an oversubscription of musicians and lots of clubs closing. I don't know. Is that kind of the experience that you've got, or are you out of that circle now?
I mean, yes, that is true. Like I mentioned, Rockwood closed. There was a legendary place called the 55 Bar that was a great live music place. But other places open up. Just being a little older, I hate to keep coming back to this. It's just kind of is what it is. I'm 57. I'll be 58.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, yes, some clubs have closed. The music schools are cranking out more young musicians who can just play their asses off. There are more musicians than there are opportunities. But I think that was always true. to an extent. And when you're younger, you kind of just look at all that stuff with a different set of eyes. So when I feel that way, the way that this guy you were saying at the music store described, I do feel that way sometimes. Like, oh, things are drying up. But then I look around and I know some younger guitar players who are playing, 4 or 5 times a week. They're playing weddings on the weekends. It still exists, but it's easy to forget how hungry you may have been for it when you were younger. And when you get to be the age that I am, we also slow down a bit. I don't have kids, but a lot of my friends have kids, or you move to the suburbs or whatever. And it's all, I think it's just a very natural thing. I wouldn't want to work 5, 6 shows a week. Even if it were possible, I wouldn't want to. So I figure out other things to do. I have a Patreon where I teach. I go on the road with Liz Wright a few times a year. I teach at guitar camps. I occasionally teach private lessons, although less of that these days. I know some musicians who write either music for TV shows or for music libraries. Or they play Broadway shows. I know a lot of John Harrington plays a lot of shows on Broadway, and he's an incredible actor that people have probably seen out on the road with Steely Dan and heard him on his own records and whatever. Everybody just tries to figure out what to do, but I wouldn't want to go back to just
hustling.
No.
Okay.
But I think one could, and I think younger players are doing that, and they're maybe just not playing at the places that we all used to play because those places have closed down. But I think it is very possible to play as often as you want.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not much younger than you. I'm 44, and I get asked to do certain things, like singer-songwriter wants a guitar player. I go, oh yeah, no, I could do that. Yeah, what's the vibe? What are you doing? He's like, okay, well, it's, I've written an album. I want to go out and start gigging it. I was like, okay, like, can we meet up for a coffee in town? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to I don't want to get a train. Why don't we do a Zoom call? We'll just do that. Right. And she's like, no, I really like to meet in person. I'm like, okay, yeah. But 20 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, sure. I'll jump on the train, no problem. And so with 2 small kids, I'm like, well, I've got to get a babysitter. I've got to hop on a train. It's going to be a 4, maybe 5-hour round trip. So it's going to cost £60 for a babysitter. Then my wife comes home from work. She's like, where have you been all day? Oh, I've done this. Why did you do that? That doesn't sound very... Like, why are you doing that? I was like, okay, yeah, why am I doing that? And then they say, well, yeah. I said, well, what's the fee for the gig? Oh, there isn't any money. Okay. Yeah, no, I don't think this is the gig for me.
Yeah. And I remember about 10 years ago, I've been going back and forth between the coasts for a long time. And 10 years ago, I was living in LA for a few years. And I remember calling up a drummer that I really wanted to play with for my band where I sing. Because, like I said, I'm also a singer-songwriter. I don't know if people know that about me. But and he's a legendary drummer. He's worked with a bunch of people I know. And I asked him if he wanted to do, and he just was like, no. And he just was at a point where he's like, I don't want to learn more, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but I kind of took it I took it personally because I really wanted to play with him, and he just was like, no. And it didn't matter. I mean, I offered him a bunch, for what the gig was, I offered him money that didn't make even sense. I was like, I'll pay you. But he's like, no, at this point, I play on records and I play with my friends, and you play on records because that's usually a real payday, and you play with your friends because you love to. And he wasn't interested in freelancing because of kind of the thing that you're talking about, which is there's always this sort of courting period and then the next period of like having to learn those songs. And at that 10 years ago, I was like, wow, what a drag. And then now I'm kind of the same way. I try to be as positive as I can. If I don't want to do it or can't do it, I always have somebody that I would recommend.
Yeah.
And I think it's just life.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting older. I've got to prioritise certain things over other things, and those doing gigs for little or no money and having to take a train up to King's Cross or something that's not a priority for me.
Yeah, and I think that's
But 20 years ago, I'd have jumped at it. Be like, yeah, no, sure, yeah, I'll do that.
But I think all of us have that responsibility. It's the same even with practicing. I would say, like 20 years ago, I was all over the place. I would practice out of one book, I'd practice out of another book. And this is even before YouTube was telling me all the stuff I needed to practice. I would just feel that way because I read an interview with somebody in a guitar magazine and they would talk about what they were working on. Or I'd go out to see a live show in town and be bowled over by something that somebody did and go home and say, I've got to work on
learn that. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you get older, I think, or for me anyway, I practice fewer things because it's more important to me to actually get somewhere with those things and not just be kind of running errands up and down the fretboard all the time.
Yeah.
So, I don't mean for the theme of this conversation to be getting older, but at the same time, I think the more you embrace it, the more beautiful it is. There's just, you get more focused on what's important. And you try to just double down on the important things, and that means saying no to other things, and that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you, what was your practice like today versus 20 years ago, but you've aptly explained it. So, I mean, what kind of things are you working on at the moment?
A few months ago, I got really curious about Barry Harris.
Okay.
Do you know who he was?
No.
He was a jazz pianist and educator. Did a lot of teaching in the last couple of decades of his life.
Yeah.
And some pretty well-known musicians, not just guitar players, all kinds of singers and piano players studied with him. And he had a really particular way of looking at harmony and melody that's quite a bit different from what you would learn at a typical music school.
Okay.
He had his own kind of musical philosophy. Anyway, I started to hear about him and hear so the last few months I've been interested in especially his approach to harmony. I got a book about it, and it just really has to do with diminished chords and passing chords, and I'll just leave it at that. But so on my music stand right now is this Barry Harris chord book. I've been trying to get that under my fingers. There is a book of solo violin music that Bach wrote that's pretty well known, that a lot of people practice out of.
Yeah.
And then I'm also always just working on my ear, which doesn't always mean that I'm transcribing something wild. I think when you say transcribing, people imagine that you're learning a John Coltrane solo or a Michael Hedges song or just something very technical.
Yeah.
And while I think you could do that, sometimes I'll just like play along with a Tom Petty record.
Yeah.
Or not a record that I know that I already know, but something that is maybe familiar to me, but I've never done it on the guitar, and just try to really join the band. So I'm not trying to play things note for note exactly, but
yeah.
The other day I put on the Paul Simon record. I think it's just called Paul Simon. He's wearing kind of this parka, and I've never learned most of those songs, and they're tricky.
Yeah, it's not easy. Well, it's harmonically, it's quite challenging.
Yeah. So that's something I'm always working on, is just being able to hear stuff, because that's so much of my job. Like when I go out on the road with Liz Wright, it's not a Broadway show where we play the same thing every night. I really have to hear what Liz is doing, how she phrases her vocals. I need to hear how the keyboard player is playing and be in it with them. And since that's a band that doesn't rehearse very much, we live in 5 different cities. The next best thing is to just put on records and get in there. So that's something I'm always working on. And then time. So I know I said, you have to really focus it in, and I've already mentioned a whole bunch of stuff. You should see all the books that I gave away last year. I used to have a whole library of guitar books. And I reached out to the folks on my Patreon channel and just had like kind of a yard sale, but I mean, I gave it away. It was just like first come, first served. I made a Google document of all the books I had. And I said, just hit me up, give me your first, second, and third choice. And I got rid of a ton of books. So I really only have now like 3, 4 books.
Okay.
And so I try to spend more time with those things. And the ear training thing that's just a lifelong thing. But I don't believe, for myself anyway, in like an ear training method, because I'm not going to get an award for being able, like, if you just put your elbows down on a piano and you can
Yeah.
name the.
Yeah.
I think
What's
that's
that?
cool. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's really amazing. But that's not going to help me in what I do. I need to be able to kind of hear where the music is going before it gets there.
Yeah.
And that has more, that's almost more like surfing.
Ear surfing.
You have to know that the wave is coming in and know how to catch it. Or it might be like being in an improv, improv comedy group or something like that, where you just don't know what the other person's going to say. But when they say it, you just have to go forward. Like music is always moving forward. So the elbows on the piano thing is cool, but that's always kind of reactive to, okay, how many notes can you, that's, again, I'm not trying to say that that's not valuable, but if I could magically have that skill, or the skill of being able to play a song with somebody when I'm hearing it for the first time, I'd rather have, and that has to do with just knowing how harmony and songs, knowing a lot of songs, so you have an idea of like, oh yeah, maybe probably going to go to the 4 chord there, but also just picking up on all of the information that's already there. And that's not the same as a vertical stack of notes. That has more to do with flow.
Yeah. I mean, I think ear training is. I've said this lots of times. I think it's the hidden or the secret shortcut, if you like, to learning music. I mean, I have 30 odd students that I teach across private lessons, and I go into schools as well. I'll say this, and anyone who's listened to this show more than once would have heard me say that there are so many kids that just don't listen to music, and they're coming in for music lessons. And I just have to say, well, why? What's going on? Why aren't you listening to music? I mean, when I was a kid, it was, you'd save up your pocket money, you go to the record store, and what can I get for the money that I have in my pocket? And music now is so accessible, and it seems no one's listening to it, which is crazy.
You just said something that's self-evident, but I've never heard anybody put it quite so on the money, which is that accessible and nobody's listening to it. And
maybe
there's tons of it.
Maybe that's why. Maybe because it's so accessible that people don't value it, so it's seen as something that shouldn't be valued. It's bizarre to me. I mean, to me it's so valuable because maybe because I had those experiences. Like, you're flicking through the records or the CDs in the shop, and it's like, well, I've got £10. I've got to make this record last for 2 weeks or a month. Who knows when I'm going to be back in?
Yeah.
So
when I was a kid, I had a paper route. I don't know if that's a thing in the UK. But
yeah. I don't know if it's a thing anymore, but
right.
Yeah, it certainly was.
Yeah, this would have been in the late 70s, And I would take all of my paper route money, well, not all of it, a good chunk of it, and go to the record store that was near our house. And I would buy 2 things. First of all, I'd buy the latest edition of Guitar Player magazine. And then, knowing from last month's Guitar Player magazine, I knew which records I wanted to buy, but I could usually only buy 1 or 2. So, like, I'd read about George Benson and think, I should get a George Benson record. But which one?
Yeah.
And there were no listening stations back then. That was something that happened like in the 90s. You'd go into Virgin Records and you could put on headphones and hear something. But I guess there were some record stores would have turntables where you could listen to stuff, but not the store in my town. So I would just be going back and forth between the magazine and the records. And then later on, like even in my late teens, I used to play this brunch gig when I was living in Northern California. I played this Sunday brunch gig. And every Sunday after my gig, I would have this, jar full of cash from tip money. And I would go to the record store. There's this great record store that's still there. It's called Down Home Music. Incredible selection. And so I was buying new records all the time, but still, even if you've got $35 or $40, you have to make decisions about what am I going to buy? Oh, it would have meant something.
I think that's missing today. I think that's what people are missing. Not missing because they're missing out or yearning for it. I think that experience just isn't there anymore.
Ah, so strange.
It's just progress, I guess, and we're just going to have to stop shouting and yelling at clouds.
Yeah.
But I know vinyl records. I don't know. I'm sure it's the same in the States, but vinyl record sales are now up. A lot of hipsters.
Yeah.
So, the other thing I'm going to ask about is getting better. What does getting better mean to you? Today versus yesterday, or let's say 10 years, 20 years ago. How's it changed?
It comes back to the word that I was saying about Liz Wright. It has to do with connectivity. 20 years ago, getting better for me had to do with turning the metronome faster and faster, working on a piece of music and getting it to be faster, or getting as complete with something as I could. So if I was learning a new scale, I wanted to be able to play it all over the fretboard. And I wanted to be able to play it in every key, in every position. And I still think that's valuable. And I do work on that, and I recommend it to my students. But today, when I think about music, it has much more to do with getting better. To the point of your question, has to do with playing with people, even ear training. Ear training in the service of playing with people, getting a good sound in the service of playing with people, like whether it's on a record or on a stage or what have you, rather than sitting at home and dialing in the best possible sound. In terms of what? That's, I would say, the biggest shift for me.
Yeah.
From young me to today, getting better really has to do with in the service of why are we doing this? What is it for? And it's almost always has to do with playing with people, playing for people.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I think that the search for tone has been something that's really shifted in my playing over the last 4 or 5 years.
How so?
Yeah, well, there was always this almost like a nonchalant attitude towards it. Like I'd have an amp, I'd set it up, that's good enough. Here's an overdrive pedal, here's a thing that will give me a bit of a boost, here's a delay and reverb. I don't really care what they are, so long as I can do the gig. And the more I started to listen back to my sound as I got older, I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good. And then you start to listen to other people, like, I like that. And then you start, what's that? What are you, how, what? And then you come back home, you rearrange the pedals, like, no, I don't like that, put this in, try this amp with this guitar with this amp sounds great, but this guitar with that amp doesn't sound as good, I don't like that, okay, but this one with that one sounds, and it's, this sounds great on a funk gig, I love this compression pedal, I hate that compressor pedal, right, so I'm not going to use that, and then, you're just in this constant cycle of gear coming in, gear going out, and yeah, it's bizarre. Talking of gear, I mean, are you still analog gear? Have you made the shift to digital stuff yet, or are you
sort of? I mean, mostly no. On my pedal board, I have one digital pedal. I have a universal audio. It's called Del Verb because it's delay and reverb. And those are models of things that are in the analog world. Like within the pedal, you've got a model of a Electro-Harmonix Deluxe Memory Man. You've got a model of an Echoplex, and then you've got models of spring reverb and plate reverb. But it's just handy on a pedal board not to have, like, I'm not going to take out a pedal board that has like a Boss DD3 and a Deluxe Memory Man and an Echoplex on it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. So to have that all in one place with the easy switch is great, and the reverb sounds great. Last year got very, very close to getting a quad Cortex.
Yeah.
Because my friend John Smith, do you know John Smith?
No.
He lives in Frome, like where Mick and Dan are.
That was in the news recently that they've kind of dissolved their council and everything's run by the town. Is that Frome?
Not sure.
I'm not sure. No, okay, but I'm sure it is. I'm sure they dissolved the council and now the whole town is run by the inhabitants.
Is that good?
I don't know. I was like, well, it sounds pretty good. I mean, it's
Okay, good.
it's a bit out there, and I kind of like it. I like that kind of left field thinking.
Yeah.
Yes, but yeah, I know from down Somerset way. It's yeah.
So John lives there. He's an incredible singer-songwriter, mostly plays acoustic. And he came through New York a few months ago and played and asked me to sit in with him. He's an old friend. And he was playing his acoustic through a quad Cortex with all the stuff you would have in there, reverb and delay and compression and EQ. And his guitar just sounded fantastic.
Okay.
And it makes sense, he's traveling all over the world playing with different, you never know who the sound person is going to be, you never know what the system is. And so he's pretty much self-contained. So I got really excited about that idea, but I didn't pull the trigger, so to speak, on it because I still like to have pedals that are analog pedals. So on the whole, like I played a gig last night. On my pedal board was just three things: a tuner and a Greer Lightspeed.
Okay.
You know that overdrive?
No, I don't. But I do like new overdrives.
It's wonderful. It's very mild. It's not, if you're trying to get, it doesn't sound like a Dumble amp. It's not that. It just sounds like you leaned over and turned your amp up from 4 to 5, But
it adds a little sparkle.
And it's got this EQ knob that just says frequency that does a really nice thing. It's not a high pass filter. It's more of, we just have to hear it. But anyway, so that was my overdrive, which just stayed on all night, I think. And then this Delverb. And with those three things, I could play, for me, any gig, and it's a lightweight pedal board. I put the overdrive first, so it's talking directly to the guitar, then the tuner, and then the delay and reverb.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll ever go fully digital. I hung out. I was on the road a couple months ago. Well, actually, on that tour that you saw me with Liz, at the very beginning of that tour, I visited. Do you know Jens Larsen?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So I visited him in The Hague, and we did a little playing at his studio. And he's all in on I think it's the Quad Cortex or one of those
Fractal
Fractal.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I just plugged into that, and we're listening through like studio monitors. And it's really good. I don't dislike digital, but I'm also just a creature of habit. So the idea of learning a whole new platform is a little, I don't get that excited about it. But
yeah. But then, it's another thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I still feel like I'm getting to know the ins and outs of the pedals I already have. So, I mean, we'll see what the future holds. I'm not anti-digital, but at the moment I'm using physical amplifiers.
Yeah.
When I go out on the road with Liz, I just usually request like a 65 deluxe reissue. And it's fine. I don't think that's a very good amp, but it's fine.
Yeah.
And that's all I need it to be is fine. I've got some pedals that can put a little shine on it. And yeah, do you embrace the digitals?
Do you know what? I said that I never would, but then 90% of my gigs is going out and doing sort of corporates and functions and weddings, and so I have to take a PA with me, and it's just one less heavy piece of gear to carry, and I've got to load it all into my car. So I'm like, well, space is quite valuable. So I get the top speakers in, I get the bass bins in. It's like the desk goes in. It's like, well, do I want to carry an amp? Or do I have a little Line 6 thing which just sits on a board and I just carry a small pedal board and go straight in? I don't think it sounds as good. I've got the Line 6, the Helix Line 6 Stomp, which is, it's okay. And I put a few pedals in front of it because the overdrives in it I think are dreadful. And I've got it set up where I'm kind of like, it's okay. I'm not over the moon with it. I'm happy with it, and it does the job. No one else notices. It sounds fine.
It sounds fine.
And so it's one less thing to carry, and I'm happy with it.
It's not the most sexy way to think about guitar, but like it's fine. I think it's underrated.
The thing is that I heard a really great phrase that said the word fine, when you use it in the context of food, means it's excellent. How was your dinner? It was that like fine dining. How's your tone in your guitar? It's fine. Basically means it's just about acceptable for the gig. But when we're talking about food, we're talking about it's top tier
I love
Michelin
that.
star restaurant.
I love that. Yeah. And I have a friend, Rich Hinman. He's a guitarist and pedal steel player. He's my best friend, really, at least in the guitar part of my life. And we talk about this stuff all the time. How can I do more with less? And how much does, like, I don't want to encourage the kind of attitude of like, well, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Because again, it has to do with the context in which you're saying that and the tone of what you're conveying. When Rich and I decide, like, whatever, the difference between this pedal or this amp, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that we don't care, but it just means that we can get the job done with, one less trip.
Yeah.
Up and down the stairs of I live on the third floor of a New York apartment.
Yeah.
I don't want to make 2 trips up and down every time
Yeah.
going to a little gig. I often use the amp that's at the gig, even though I have 2 amps that I dearly love that I think sound fantastic. But in New York, if a place already has an amp, even if it's like there's a jazz club that I like to play at, and they have a Hendrickson amp that's really cool. It sounds great. It's not the amp I would choose, but it's there. And it's wonderful. And when I listen to sometimes somebody in the audience will take an iPhone recording and they'll post it or whatever. It sounds like me. It's cool. I mean, when I say it doesn't matter or it's fine, it also means well, you know what? A lot of it is what I'm doing. I'm more interested in what can I do from finger or plectrum to the string to the all that stuff, so that it's just I don't want to use the F word, but
you can use it, that's fine.
Okay, that it's just kind of unfuckable. Like, you do what you can to make it so that you're not, I mean, as a joke, kind of like what you're saying about fine, like Rich, like in the UK, do you have the story about Goldilocks and the 3 Bears?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like Rich and I have this joke, like, this porridge is too hot. This porridge was too cold. This porridge, it's fine. You know what? It's fine. And we kind of are that way with, doing what we do. You're getting on and off of airplanes and you're showing up to places with unknown amplifiers and maybe having a 5-minute sound check that has to accommodate many other people. And your name's not the one on the marquee.
Yeah.
So all of the tone dialing that you dream about or read about in guitar magazines, at the sound check, you're not going to get to do that. So try to just make everything that you can happen from how you play and how you listen. And the other stuff is just, of course we love it. I mean, if you went through my browser history, you'd see lots of visits to Reverb and I'm not going to pretend that I don't do that, but at the end of the day, that's not what makes most of the music that I love is not based on the gear as much as it's based on somebody just having a point of view about music or somebody having curiosity that they're willing to follow down wherever it goes,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's more about what you have to say than the tools that you're using to say it. Maybe I guess it's like writers argue about what's your favourite pen. It's like, well, it's just a tool, but what I'm actually trying to say is more important than the pen. The pen I'm using, in essence, doesn't really matter so long as I can convey the message.
Yeah, I took a writing workshop years ago with this great writer, creative writing class from Linda Berry, and she she really was like, yeah, I'll go to like thrift stores and just buy, a box full of old paperbacks or books or whatever. And like, so instead of like going to buy a fancy notebook with a beautiful cover to write her journal, she'll just buy old dusty paperbacks and just write in them. Because the point of
Yeah.
writing isn't that like you're going to write your novel in there. You're just getting in the flow, and the tools don't matter that much. One of my favorite videos on YouTube that I just recently discovered was like 63 ways to cook an egg or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
And a few of them need extra stuff. Like he talks about, but most of it is just various sources of heat
Mm.
and various kinds of fat and an egg.
Mm.
And it's kind of amazing how much, I mean, it starts simple and it gets to be sort of ridiculous, like wrapping it in tinfoil and putting it on your engine block or something
Yeah.
like that. But I think all of us as guitar players could stand to watch that video or something like it. If you don't want to watch 60 Ways to Cook an Egg, that's fine.
Yeah.
But don't buy something just because you're bored. Don't change the channel of, if you were watching television, like don't change, stay with something a little bit longer and see what's there, see what you can do with the pickup, even like with gear, like instead of buying a new pickup, see what happens if you raise it or lower it a bit, or if it's got adjustable pole pieces, try that, or try a different kind of string. That's pretty cheap, try a different kind of pick. Don't using a pick. There's just a lot you can do without spending a lot of money.
Yeah. I know that like the whole raising the pickup thing, that was, I took my guitar in to get serviced, and the guy looked at it and he went, pickups are a bit high. I was like, oh. I thought the higher you get, the better the sound. He's like, lower it. Almost you want them not flush to the body, you want them just a little bit above. Like, play around with it, but that's kind of where the magic happens. It's like, you're way too close. Yeah, and he lowered them, and I got it back, it was like a different guitar. So it's like it's breathing a little bit. There's a little bit of air in there. It was bizarre, but yeah, I think getting the most out of your gear. Turn everything up to 11, see what it does. Turn everything to 1, see what it does. Just yeah, crazy. It's I think I'm certainly, like you said, I'm a sucker for just you sitting on the sofa and you go, just go onto eBay. Let's see if there are any. What's here? What have we got?
Yeah.
But yeah, and when people post like I'm selling some gear, I always message them like, I don't need any more gear. I don't need any more gear. I don't need any more. How much for that pedal? Yeah, but I think I don't need any more gear. I think I just need to really dive deep into the stuff that I have got.
That's what I'm trying to do, and what I encourage. If anybody asks me, that's what I would encourage. It's not the most fun conversation to have, but it's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Just in the past few days, I've gotten rid of a few guitars, not things that I had bought and sold, but sometimes a guitar company will lend me something, or a friend will lend me something. Oh, you got to try this. And I'm just trying to have as few guitars in. This is my music room where I'm sitting now. I try to have as few guitars as I can now, and maybe we'll see how long that lasts. But that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I know. The other thing, I'll let you go after this. Do you think that there's what's a skill that you think every musician needs to work on? Actually, no. I've got one more question to add off this.
Okay, sure. Well, okay. So
predominantly guitar players, but I think any musician. What do you think is something that everybody needs to work on?
Well, it's time, but with a specific footnote there. I don't want to just say time, because then it sounds like what I'm saying, what everybody needs to work on is getting on the grid. Get on the grid. Getting on the grid is just the first step, but really, like, time that breathes and time that makes room for other people. I think every musician needs to have that. Time is what allows you to play well with other. Like, you have to agree on where the quarter note is and where all the little semi quavers or whatever
Yeah.
are in between. But doesn't mean you have to then all do the same thing together, but just to be aware of it. Like if you listen to Bob Marley and the Wailers, they're not all dividing the chord. They all agree on where the quarter note is, but they don't all play. Like what makes that music so beautiful is like it's like the difference between wearing a shirt that's a solid color or a shirt that has like some kind of wild pattern on it. Like
Yeah.
even when they're doing something sort of that seems straight ahead, there's so much going on in it, you know? So I think that the skill that every musician needs to have above anything else is time and an awareness of time that is that.
Okay, I think that's a wonderful answer. The last question. This will be the last one, and I'll let you go. If I can phrase it properly, what is something about being a musician or about music that you think everybody should know or everybody should learn?
That I think everybody who plays music should learn, or that
non-musicians. What do you think non-musicians should know about music?
Right. That's a really good question. Nobody's asked me that before.
I scratched my head on it. The only thing that I can come up with is that I like the answer that not all harmony sounds nice. Like you harmonize something in minor seconds, it sounds dreadful, but it has its place.
Yeah.
Not all harmony sounds nice.
That's really good.
Or another one is not all musicians rehearse together all the time. We can just turn up and jam and just play in it. If everyone knows what they're doing, we don't need to even know each other. We can just turn up and play.
Right. And I do love that. And that's something that to a non-musician just seems like, you know.
What the hell, yeah.
Yeah. Seems like sorcery or something.
Yeah.
But I guess a thing, I'll say this because it came up in conversation just a couple of days ago. A friend of mine was saying she's coming more at music. She's a really great guitar player, but coming at music more from kind of shoegaze bands, and she's starting to listen to jazz, and she was asking me for recommendations. What's a good kind of first record to get if you're interested in jazz guitar? And then she was saying, to her, what makes something jazz is that, once the solos start, there's this real freedom and it could just go anywhere. And I said, yeah, but, are you aware that there's like a song form repeating underneath that stream of consciousness? I mean, of course, there is jazz that doesn't have that. There's jazz that's just completely spontaneous. But in the mainstream of jazz, what most people listen to and what most people think of when they think of jazz is actually a lot less chaotic than, and I wish I could put it as succinctly as you did, is like, not all harmony sounds good.
Yeah.
Musicians can just show up and jam without rehearsing. But I think I'd have to work on an edited version of this to land like that. But basically just that jazz music, more often than not, is about these song cycles. And just in the same way that 12-bar blues is about that cycle. Everybody who's played a little bit can get that. And the more you can start to hear that, which really comes down to learning the songs of jazz, learning common tunes that people play, then it starts to get, I think, really fun because, so I don't know how to wrap this into a nice little...
You don't have to. I've had a lot of time I've been pondering this for a while, so I don't expect it to be kind of tied up with a little bow. I think it's something to ponder on. I think it's a really interesting thing just to think about, like, how do non-musicians think about music? Because I know a lot of people who are so passionate about music. They go out to concerts, they go to gigs, they buy the t-shirt. They're so enveloped in music, but they don't play an instrument. And to me, that leap from one to the other is such a short leap, and it's so easy.
Yeah.
Why aren't you doing it? Like, I don't know, is there like this mystery wall that you think is fenced off that you're not allowed to do it?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I asked them, I said, well, why don't you want to? It's like, oh, I'm not talented enough, I don't have this. Like, you don't need to be. 5% talent is 95% just sitting with the fucking instrument, the book, and just grinding through it until it starts to sound effortless. It's like learning anything.
I am not talented. I'm just stubborn. I started playing when I was 11 or 12, and I'm still working on it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we all are, yeah.
You know, and a lot of people start out and just get discouraged or whatever. And yeah, it's true. I have a couple of cousins on different sides of my family that I think spend more money each year on going to concerts and going to festivals. They'll fly somewhere just to go hear their favorite. If their favorite band isn't coming to where they live, they'll get on a plane because they're on the mailing list. And as soon as tickets go on, say, "Oh, so and so is playing, and they're not coming here." So I got like, I wouldn't do. I mean, I have done that, but it's not something I do regularly. I don't go to music festivals that much, but both of my cousins do this all the time, and I think you should play music because, first of all, you might really enjoy it. Also, if I did all that, I could take it as a tax write-off. Like, you know, they're just paying money to. It doesn't. But it's inspiring to me. I think it's important. Let me flip that around. I know we've gone long on time, but in as much as I think it's really a great kind of thought experiment for musicians to think about something that non-musicians should know. I think, or no, sorry, the other way around. What should non-musicians know about playing music? I also think musicians should think about how all those, like, what makes them want to spend that money and get on a plane and do that stuff. Because if it's easy for a musician to think about what's important in music is scales and chords and all that stuff, but that is not of any value to lay people, and yet they spend time and money and energy, and like they hire babysitters and dog sitters and cat sitters or whatever to go hear music. And I think musicians owe it to themselves and to the fans to, like, why did they do that? Because I know musicians who have forgot. They've been drinking the Kool-Aid of it for so long that they've actually forgotten why that is. And I think it's worth thinking of.
I mean, if we could tap into why people spend the time and the money, then that would just make our job easier.
Yeah.
So much easier.
Yeah.
Just getting tickets out the door, getting bums on seats, getting people, or when you're performing to those people, it's like, well, what do they want to hear? That's something I've never thought about until now. What do those people out there, what do they want to hear? What do they want from me? Well, there you go. There's a good little thought experiment for tomorrow's gig. Like, what am I going to do tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay. Man, Adam, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time. It's been a journey. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
And we'll speak very soon.
Okay.
All right.